Zorna stood alone in the shadowed corner of the bustling spaceport, her violet eyes scanning the crowd. It was a place filled with alien species from all corners of the galaxy: humans, Zoraiks, Valyrians, and many more. But among them, Zorna felt like an outcast. To them, she was not just a strange alien. She was a monster. Her pale blue skin, sharp cheekbones, and glowing eyes made her an object of fear. Even now, as she stood there, she could hear whispers behind her back. Why is she here? That's the monster from the outer moons. Stay away from her. The voices stung like sharp needles, but Zorna had long since stopped flinching. She had learned to silence the hurt, to bury it deep within. Years of rejection had made her hardened. She was used to being shunned, used to being feared. Yet even now the words still left a bitter taste in her mouth. She glanced down at her reflection in a piece of polished glass nearby. The image staring back at her was cold, distant, a reminder of everything she hated about herself. She had tried to smile once, to show the world that she wasn't the monster they thought her to be, but no one had smiled back. No one had understood. She had tried so hard to fit in. She had learned their languages, their customs, even their way of speaking. Yet every time she reached out, she was met with rejection. She had been told countless times that she was too different, too alien, too monstrous. And with every rejection, every sneer, a small part of her belief in her own worth faded away. Zorna's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a loud, excited voice from behind. "Hey, there she is, the alien from the outer moons." Zorna froze, the words hitting her like a wave. The voice belonged to a human. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of a group of scientists gathered nearby, all wearing their usual uniforms. They were pointing at her, laughing as if her presence was nothing more than a joke. "I heard she's been causing trouble on the outer worlds. They say she has the power to destroy whole cities," another scientist said with a chuckle. A third chimed in. "She's a monster, nothing more. I don't even know why they let her in here." The group burst into laughter and Zorna felt a rush of anger surge through her. But she couldn't do anything. She couldn't defend herself. What could she possibly say? They were right, weren't they? She was a monster. Every time she looked in the mirror, that's what she saw. A creature far from human, far from the others. A being that would never belong. Her hands clenched into fists, but she kept her face expressionless. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her angry. She had learned to control her emotions, to mask her pain, but inside the hurt was consuming her. She turned away and walked briskly down the corridor, keeping her head down to avoid any further confrontation. Zorna passed through the busy marketplace, the hustle and bustle of alien traders and tourists failing to lift her spirits. The crowd parted as she walked, giving her plenty of space like they were afraid to get too close. They saw her as a threat, a danger, a monster, and that's how she had always felt. She stopped at a stall selling alien trinkets, hoping to lose herself in the simple task of browsing. The shopkeeper, a small furry alien with 6 eyes, looked at her nervously but said nothing. Zorna picked up a small, ornate necklace, a reminder of the beauty of other cultures, the beauty she would never be part of. She wondered what it would be like to wear something delicate and beautiful like that, to feel accepted by those around her. But the necklace didn't belong to her world, just as she didn't belong to theirs. "Nice choice," said the shopkeeper, breaking her thoughts. Zorna barely looked at him. "How much?" The shopkeeper hesitated, his 6 eyes darting nervously around the room. For you I can give a discount since, you're. Zorna didn't need to hear the rest. She knew what he meant. Her appearance was a constant reminder to others that she was an outcast, something to be feared. She put the necklace down and turned away, walking out of the store with her head held low. It wasn't until she reached the outside of the spaceport that she stopped and took a deep breath. The hot desert wind swept over her, carrying the scent of the alien sands. She had been walking aimlessly for hours, but nothing had changed. Nothing ever changed. The world would always see her as the monster, the one who didn't belong, the one who would never fit in. Just then something caught her eye. A human figure standing at the edge of the spaceport watching her. It wasn't unusual for humans to be around, but there was something different about this one. He wasn't pointing, laughing, or staring with fear in his eyes. He simply stood there as if waiting for her. Zorna's heart skipped a beat. Was he here to mock her too? Or was he someone else? Someone who could see beyond the surface? Before she could make up her mind, the human stepped forward, meeting her gaze, and for the first time in her life, someone looked at her with kindness. He didn't see a monster. He saw her. Zorna's breath caught in her throat, and the seed of hope, long buried, began to stir within her. Could it be? Could there really be someone who didn't see her as a monster? The man's lips parted as if he was about to speak, and Zorna braced herself. But what would he say? Would he laugh? Would he call her a monster again? "Hey," he said softly, his voice calm. "You're perfect." Zorna stood frozen for a moment, staring at the human who had spoken to her. His words echoed in her ears. "You're perfect." It was like a dream, a glimmer of hope in a world that had always rejected her. Her heart raced, her violet eyes wide with confusion. Was he mocking her? Was this just another cruel joke? She had heard similar words before, but they had always been laced with sarcasm or fear. But this time it felt different. The human stood still, waiting for her response. There was no laughter in his eyes, no fear, just an honest, open gaze. He didn't look at her like a monster. He didn't recoil from her appearance. He simply saw her. Zorna took a step back, unsure of what to do. Her mind was in chaos. She had spent so many years being rejected, being treated like something less than human, that she didn't know how to respond to someone who was actually treating her with kindness. The man smiled, sensing her hesitation. "I know it might sound strange," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, "but I meant it. I don't care about how you look. I see the real you." Zorna's breath hitched. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had spent her life hiding her true self behind a mask of silence and solitude, convinced that no one could ever see past her appearance. But this man, this stranger, saw something more. "I'm Alex," he added, taking a small step forward, "and you don't have to be afraid of me." Zorna glanced around nervously, but the people who had passed by moments ago were no longer there. It was just her and Alex, standing in the quiet of the spaceport, the faint hum of machinery in the background. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in so long. Trust. "I'm Zorna," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not perfect. I'm not like you." Alex shook his head. "You're exactly like me," he said, his tone firm but gentle. "You're just different, but that doesn't make you any less." Zorna's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone could see past the blue skin, the glowing eyes, the sharp features. But the years of rejection, the constant reminder that she was a monster, weighed heavily on her heart. How could she accept his kindness when all her life, the world had told her she didn't belong? "I don't understand," Zorna said, her voice tinged with doubt. "Why would you say that? Why would you waste your time talking to someone like me?" Alex's expression softened. He took a step closer, but not too close, giving her the space she needed. "Because I see you for who you really are, Zorna. Not the monster everyone else sees, but the person you've been hiding all this time. I've met many people in my life, and I know that sometimes it's the ones who are different that are the most amazing. You have a story to tell, a story that deserves to be heard." Zorna felt a lump form in her throat. She had never thought of herself as someone with a story. She had always been the alien, the outcast, the one who was invisible to the world. But Alex saw her, really saw her. It was as if a small light had been flicked on in the darkness of her life, and she couldn't look away. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex smiled warmly. "Because everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not just what others think of them. You deserve to be happy, Zorna. You deserve to feel like you belong. Zorna swallowed, hard, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered. It was as if the walls she had built around her heart were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. For a long moment, there was silence between them. Zorna took in a shaky breath, trying to gather the courage to respond. She looked into Alex's eyes, searching for any hint of deceit, any sign that this was all just some cruel trick. But there was nothing, only sincerity. "You really believe that?" she asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. "I do," Alex said, his voice unwavering. "I believe in you, Zorna. I believe that you have the strength to overcome everything the world has thrown at you, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Zorna's heart ached as the weight of his words settled in. She had spent so many years convincing herself that she was worthless, that no one could ever truly accept her. But Alex was, offering her something she had never thought possible. Hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, she could change her life. That she could stop hiding in the shadows and step into the light. But the fear was still there. The fear that this kindness would fade, that it was all too good to be true. Zorna had been let down too many times before. "What do you expect from me?" Zorna asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" Alex's eyes softened as he stepped forward, his voice gentle yet firm. "I'm not expecting anything from you, Zorna. I'm just offering you a chance to see yourself the way I see you. Beautiful, strong, and capable of more than you know." For the first time in her life, Zorna allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years. Hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something she could never have imagined for herself. Maybe it was time to stop hiding, to stop believing the lies that had kept her in the shadows. The silence between them grew, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a moment of understanding, a bond forming between two very different beings who had both felt alone in this vast universe. "Thank you," Zorna whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me." Alex smiled. "You're welcome, and I'll always see you." The days following Zorna's encounter with Alex felt like a dream. Every moment she spent with him brought something new: hope, understanding, and the possibility that she could change. She had never allowed herself to feel this vulnerable before, never let her guard down around anyone. But with Alex it was different. He didn't see her as a monster. He saw her as a person, as someone who deserved love and acceptance, just like any other being. But the more time they spent together, the more Zorna began to struggle with the overwhelming fear that had haunted her for years. What if Alex was wrong? What if, deep down, she really was the monster everyone claimed her to be? Could she truly change? Could she really be the person Alex believed her to be? Zorna found herself walking through the streets of the city again, but this time, the familiar jeers and whispers seemed louder. She had hoped for once to escape them, to be free from the constant judgment, but they followed her wherever she went. It was as if the world was determined to remind her that she didn't belong. The sight of a group of humans walking past her sent a chill through her. Their eyes flicked nervously to her, then quickly away. Some muttered to each other, making sure they stayed at a safe distance. Zorna could feel the weight of their fear pressing against her, suffocating her, as if she were a dangerous predator in their midst. No matter how hard she tried to act like she didn't care, their judgment burned through her like acid. She stumbled to a stop, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest. The old feelings of rejection, of being cast aside, were creeping back. Maybe Alex had been wrong. Maybe she was meant to be alone forever, destined to live as an outcast. Maybe there was no way out. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to shut out the painful memories of the past. "What's wrong with me?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "Why can't they just see me for who I am?" Suddenly, a hand appeared before her, gently lifting her chin to meet the gaze of the person who had spoken. Zorna's breath hitched, and she looked up to find Alex standing in front of her, his eyes full of concern. "Zorna," he said softly. "What's going on? You look like you're about to break." Zorna shook her head, stepping back from him, feeling the walls she had spent so many years building between herself and others rise once again. "You don't understand," she muttered, her voice trembling with frustration. "I can't keep pretending. I'm not like you. I don't belong in your world." Alex reached out again, but this time, Zorna pulled away, her heart racing with panic. "Zorna, please," he said, his voice pleading. "You don't have to be afraid. You're not a monster. You're not alone anymore." She couldn't hold it in any longer. Tears welled up in her eyes as she fought to keep them from falling. "But I am. I always have been. Every time I try to be someone else, I end up failing. They see me as nothing but a freak, a threat. They don't see me like you do, Alex. They never will." The words came out in a rush, like a dam finally breaking. Zorna had never allowed herself to admit her deepest fears, not even to herself. She had buried them deep, inside, trying to convince herself that she was strong enough to handle it all. But the truth was she was terrified. Terrified that no matter what Alex said, no matter how kind he was, she would never be accepted. Alex didn't speak at first. He simply stood there, his hand still extended toward her, waiting. Zorna was afraid to look him in the eyes. She was afraid that if she did, she would see the pity she had feared all along. But when she finally forced herself to meet his gaze, she found something completely different. There was no pity, no judgment, only understanding. "Zorna," Alex said, his voice low and steady. "I know it's hard. I know you're scared. But you're not alone in this. I won't let you go back to the darkness, to the place where you're all alone. You don't have to hide anymore." Zorna felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. She was afraid of what would happen if she let go of the walls she had built. She was afraid of how vulnerable she would feel. She had spent so long convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, that she didn't deserve anyone, that to let someone in would be the same as inviting them to hurt her. But Alex's words were different. They didn't feel like pity. They felt like a lifeline. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I do," Alex replied, his gaze unwavering. "And I'll show you, Zorna. Every day. But you have to let me in. You have to trust that I won't hurt you. I know it's scary, I know it's hard, but you're worth it. You deserve to see yourself the way I see you." Zorna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. She had spent so long hiding behind her fear, behind the walls she had built to protect herself from the pain of rejection. But Alex wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to be real, to let go of the fear that had controlled her for so long. The silence stretched between them, but this time, it was filled with something new. Hope. A flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. For the first time in her life, Zorna took a step forward, not out of fear, but out of trust. She extended her hand to Alex, and he took it without hesitation. In that moment, Zorna realized that she didn't have to fight this battle alone. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. She could be herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden hue over the vast city. But Zorna couldn't take her eyes off the horizon. Everything around her felt different, yet somehow the same. The streets she had walked down countless times before now seemed less intimidating, the air less suffocating. She had spent so much of her life running, hiding, trying to escape the world's cruel judgment. But for the first time, she felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. Zorna stood at the edge of the city, looking out at the bustling world before her. It was the same world that had rejected her, the same people who had called her a monster. But now she saw it with new eyes. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't a threat. She was just Zorna, a person worthy of love, kindness, and respect. The Memories of her past, the whispers, the looks of fear, the constant rejection, felt distant now. She had allowed those voices to define her for far too long, letting them shape her perception of herself. But Alex had shown her something different. He had shown her that it was okay to be vulnerable, to be seen for who she truly was. He had made her believe for the first time that she didn't need to hide. She turned around as the familiar sound of footsteps approached. Alex. He had been by her side every step of the way, his presence a constant source of strength. He had never once faltered, never once made her feel less than. He had shown her kindness when she didn't think she deserved it. And in doing so, he had unlocked a part of her that had been buried for far too long. Zorna smiled as Alex stopped, beside her, his face warm with understanding. He didn't say anything at first, he didn't need to. His presence was enough. "I've been thinking," Zorna began, her voice soft but steady. "About everything, about how I used to see myself." Alex nodded, his eyes full of quiet encouragement. "I used to think that I didn't belong," Zorna continued, "that no matter what I did, I'd always be the monster, the outcast. But you," she hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "You showed me something different. You made me believe that I can be more than that." Alex's expression softened and he gently took her hand. "I'm glad you see that, Zorna, because you are more than what they made you out to be. You're more than just what you see on the outside. You're strong, you're capable, and most of all, you're worthy." Zorna closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had spent so many years fighting against who she was, trying to change herself to fit into a world that would never accept her. But in that moment, she realized that she didn't need to change. She didn't need to be anyone else. She just needed to be Zorna. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer held the same weight. It didn't control her anymore. She had learned to let go of the fear, the anger, and the shame that had kept her locked in the shadows. She had learned to accept herself for who she was, flaws and all. She turned to Alex, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You've changed everything for me." Alex smiled, his gaze full of warmth. "You did all the hard work, Zorna. I was just here to remind you of what you're capable of." Zorna nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had a long way to go. There were still challenges ahead, still people who would judge her, still moments when she would doubt herself. But now, she knew she wasn't alone. She had Alex, and more importantly, she had herself. For the first time in her life, Zorna stepped forward, no longer hiding in the shadows. She walked through the streets with her head held high, not caring about the whispers or the fearful glances. She had nothing to prove to anyone anymore. She was free, as Da'auri's. She walked beside Alex. She noticed the people around them no longer seemed so distant, no longer so quick to turn away. She smiled as a child no older than 5 looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. For the first time in years, Zorna felt something stir in her heart, a connection. The child smiled back at her, not with fear, but with curiosity and wonder. Zorna realized then that this was what she had always wanted, to be seen, not as a monster but as a person. She had spent so many years waiting for the world to change, to accept her, but now she understood. The change didn't have to come from others. It had to come from within. She stopped walking, turning to Alex with a smile. "I think I'm ready," she said, her voice full of determination. Alex looked at her with a mixture of pride and affection. "Ready for what?" "Ready to show the world who I really am. Not the monster they think I am, but the person I've always been." With those words, Zorna felt a sense of clarity she had never known before. She didn't need to hide anymore. She didn't need to live in fear of the world's judgment. She had found her strength, her voice, and her purpose. The world might not always be kind, but she knew now that she didn't need its approval to be happy. She was enough, just as she was. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a beautiful glow over the city, but Zorna didn't need to look at the horizon to know that her journey was just beginning. She was no longer the alien who had been rejected by the world. She was Zorna, and she was ready to embrace her future.